All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone. So, Thursday, September 12th. So, good morning. Thanks for Stan being here. I know he had a hurricane going through his area, so thanks for being on. But we got Hunter Gore and Brandon built to rent Texas. So, their first time joining us on the live. So, why don't you guys quickly introduce yourselves real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me on. Again, my name is Hunter. I've been investing in real estate for about 3.5 years now. Initially got started in the investing world as an agent. So I've been a real estate agent here in South Carolina, particularly Greenville or the upstate market for the last 6 years. So that's pretty much my main gig, and then it's really all about building cash flow and wealth through rental properties. So.
I'm Brandon here. Yes, I do build to rent model, but I'm an agent also. I just recently sold my sales team and own a property management company here in Fort Worth, Texas, and have been building my portfolio out. Started when I was 48, and here I am 52, so 4 years later, and 10 units, 4 properties, and lots of fun.
Cool.
I'm
So, actually, this is going to be for you then. Your main topic today is going to be kind of tenant screening and how do we protect ourselves when we get tenants. So that's I think it's gonna be a great topic up your alley. And Stan's doing some other things too in New Orleans, so he can also talk about like short-term rentals and even tenant screening on that side. So who wants to start on this?
Yeah, I could start off. We have whenever we have any kind of unit for vacancy we're trying to fill for our long-term guests, our long-term tenants, we post on places like Zillow.com rental. A lot of those platforms, they have a auto application. So once someone inquires, you can send them a link so they can apply. In addition to application, there's also a background check that Zillow does on our behalf. We always have the tenants pay, like the applicants pay for that background screening. Provides a credit rating, a background financial check, and a criminal record. So we factor all that in when we decide what tenants we want, what tenants we are not able to accept. The primary thing that we always look for is a income multiplier. We have a bare minimum requirement that we have of 3 times the whatever our rent is. We want their rental income to be their monthly revenue, their monthly pay to be 3 times what their rent is. That's both to protect ourselves to make sure they're able to pay and also to protect them. As soon as you start having to spend more than 30 or 40% of your monthly pay in living expenses, that is going to put a tremendous strain on you as a person. So we don't want to put anyone in that situation. So we're very upfront about what our requirements are.
That's great.
Cool. So
I
Hunter, you
almost wonder if
do.
those.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
sorry,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Mark. Go ahead.
No,
Well,
go
I,
ahead.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say I wonder if those requirements will ever go up. If the industry standard will go from 3% to 4% as inflation costs spike everything else from household groceries to cars. I mean, it was crazy. I drive by in Greenville what we call the Motor Mile. It's basically every car dealership in town, and I was driving by and I'm seeing all these stickers on the cars, 30, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 for what seems like a very standard car, and it just got me to thinking, like, man, how much more difficult is it going to be for everybody to afford normal things, and is that going to mean we have to tighten our standards from a rental perspective when we screen tenants? So
I can speak a little bit to this myself. My background, I was in commercial lending, and my wife was a mortgage loan officer. And so we made a change actually December of this last year in our criteria. Now, granted, I'm a property manager too, on top of the properties that I own. And we changed from 3 to 3.5. So that has become our rental criteria standard, because what I was noticing, and you're saying that right, Hunter, I was concerned with inflation with the cost of all the other things that's going on, from groceries to car payments, all the different things, that they were becoming, the other term we use is house poor. And so looking at percentage wise of your payment, somebody that was considered not house poor was where their percentage for their rent was 30% or less. If we're putting it at 3 times income, we're now having them at 33% and higher above that. And so we made the minimum criteria to 3.5, that puts it at 28% of their income, because I was allocating more room for other things that have gone through a lot of inflation. And we made that change in December. And I was talking to my lead property manager just the other day. Hey, have we seen anything different? And we manage right now about 200 doors. So I've got a good cross section, at least a decent cross section of what's going on. And I said, hey, have we been able to still lease them well? And do you feel like it's hurting us in any way going to that 3.5? And she admitted, no, it hasn't been an issue with getting things leased. Now we have some variations, and there's criteria. We could go down to 3.25. They would have to put more deposit down. So we've got a little bit of flex room, but I want to make sure with all of our renters, they're not rent poor. And so we made that change. It's speaking exactly to what you're thinking. We made that change in December, and it seems to be doing very well. We have very, very few collection issues on 200 doors.
That's great. I think for us, we'll probably end up doing something very similar to you, Brandon. We currently have 3X, which, it's been that way for years, but it's just got me thinking. The more I've been reviewing applications for a couple of our, recently vacant units, I'm like, man, it's getting really tight when you are able to, look through everything and say, okay, this is how much, they would be paying in rent. And if I, sort of back into a normal budget, it's going to be really tight at the end of the month, as people are trying to save and be ready to pay rent for next month. So it's like, you don't want to put yourself or your, in this case, your property owners, your property managers in a bind when they're trying to, work through collection issues, because somebody, they might make 60,000, but they really need to go be making 70 or 65 to really afford this property very comfortably. So
we've seen what they do is two options. They stop paying or they skip out.
I mean, one of the strategies that we had is one of the big rentals that we have are students. One of the fourplex that we own in New Orleans, it's pretty close to the Tulane campus. So students are a major, like one of our major segments. We ask for the same thing for income verification, make sure they have the multiplier as well. However, if they fall underneath the required multiplier, what we ask them to do is have a parent co-sign on their behalf. So we get to add the parent's income to the student's income as well. Once we did that, we've never had an issue. Like, we were always well above 3X. And we've had applicants that were 30X. Essentially, it comes down to Tulane. It's a fairly expensive school to get to. So if parents are able to afford to send their kids to Tulane, they're also very well off financially. So it's just another protection from us of having someone else essentially back up the tenants and say, if the tenants have problems, the parents are able to step in and help with payments.
Cool. I also forgot to mention in the beginning, Brandon's Build to Rent Texas YouTube channel. Link is in the chat, so go subscribe, because we're trying to get him to 50 so he can start streaming on his channel also. But there's also Hunter's Surprise YouTube channel I put in the chat. I didn't know he had his channel, but he's connected, so he's streaming also. And we also got Stan's Instagram and his blog links there, so go check him out. There's also, and I didn't even realize this, and I'll put it in the chat soon, but I didn't know Stan was an author or had a book on Amazon. So you want to talk about that real quick too, man?
Sure. It's a pretty quick book. I'd be surprised if it takes anyone more than an hour to read it. It's 2 separate books. One book is just a basic of what to look for in a investment property, how to identify what is a good investment. There's a section in there about screening tenants as well. And because we're on this podcast, I'm making the book free for the next 24 hours. It started at midnight last night, Pacific Central Time. So the book's going to be free until midnight tonight, Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah, so there's the link. Go check it out. Go give it a 5-star review, everyone. So, yeah, and Introvert Ike is here, and he actually said he saw Brandon. He said he saw your interview on Zuber. It's live, and he says you're doing good stuff or ground up stuff. So cool.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Stan, I want.
No, go ahead.
So
No, sure, go
sorry, my Wi-Fi must be a touch slow this morning because it seems like it's taking me a second here. So I apologize. But Stan, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question with your student rentals. One of my first experiences in real estate before I got my license was working in property management for student housing at Clemson University, so one of the bigger universities in the country. We typically always saw that parents were guarantors on the lease. I mean, 99% of the time they were guarantors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you typically see that's more the norm, or do you see typically the students have income or means to normally meet your qualifications without the guarantor?
Typically, Tulane's it's a special case because a lot of people go in Tulane, they're either pre-law or they're pre-med or they're doing residence they're in their residency, so they already have an income stream coming in because they're working at a nearby hospital. But more often than not, I'd say the parents are guarantors. But I think we've only been doing this for about 3 or 4 years now, so we're still fairly new at it as well. We've only had a handful of times where we had a new tenant come in. I believe one time I recall the student had enough income on their own to be able to meet our qualifications. But besides that, the majority of the times the parents were co-signing as guarantors.
That's
And
great.
I think it also helps that Tulane, it's more for graduate students as opposed to undergrads. So we're not really dealing with like 19 and 20-year-olds. We're dealing with typically 22, 23, 24-year-olds. So they have a little bit more time to get their feet from under them.
Yeah, that's great. Another, not that this was necessarily an issue, but one of the more unique things within Clemson, because it was predominantly undergrads, even though they do have graduate programs, it was predominantly undergrad. Clemson had a specific law for the city or the town there that you could only have 3 people who were unrelated living together. So you would typically see, a bigger 4 or 5 bedroom house where people would try to cram, anywhere from 5 to 10 people in the house. So that was always something unique, I'm sure, for those property managers. So I'm not sure if you ever ran into any of those issues.
We have something similar to that. They're not going for directly the same way you're talking about, where they're forbidding a certain amount of people that are non-related living in the same house. They're going at it from a different point, where they're trying to limit the occupancy of a certain house to the amount of parking spaces available in front of the house. So if there's only 2 parking spots available in front of the house, they're maximizing the occupancy of that house to 4 total people, so 2 per parking spot. That law hasn't actually passed here yet. It was up for city council, I believe, a year or 2 ago. I was at that session, so I saw both sides of it. What a lot of people are doing right now is they're doing exactly what you said, where they are taking single-family homes and converting them into either multi-occupancy for students, or they're converting them into multi-families. Around here, they call it doubles to dorms, where people are buying up the neighborhoods around Tulane and converting it specifically into student housing, where they're trying to maximize the amount of students they're able to put per property. There's still a lot of pushback. It's still a hot topic issue in this area. But as of now, there have been no actual laws that have been passed to kind of push that aside.
We have on our website, on our property management website, we list the rental criteria. And that is one of the things that we put. I printed it out so I could speak to it a little bit. We put anyone age 18 or older must fill out the application. We do not allow more than 4 adults per property and no more than 2 people per bedroom. It's a way to limit what you're saying, packing people in a house. So that's part of the rental criteria. And then we also, maybe y'all do this too. We have them filling out a pet screening document from petscreening.com. It's a third party document because we've had a lot of people, of course, pets are very common, but we hired a third party company to do our pet screening. It's a little more formal, and it prevents a lot of things where they have to fill out, even the people that say they don't have pets, they have to fill that pet screening out. And we've seen an improvement in the pets and the pet rents and the documentation of vaccines, the breeds, all the different things, because that has been a challenge over the previous few years that has become more predominant in, I call it some funny business going on. And they have to document it through that third party site. It also protects us for liability, but anybody has access to begin using that. They have to pay a cost for the pet screening. There is no cost for us. I think it's minimal. It's like $10, and they use that, and then they send the report. And what they do is it gives they call it a FIDO score. And so it's based off the breed, all the documentation, and from real aggressive breeds to non-aggressive breeds, and it gives a FIDO score, and it helps as an independent, not us making the determination. It's the third party site. I know that's a little bit off topic, but I wanted to bring that up. It's been valuable for us.
Yeah, we're definitely fairly selective in what kind of pets we do and don't allow. Just partially it's concerns for the property itself, and partially concerns for liability, where we prefer to avoid having like more aggressive breeds if possible. So we usually take pets on a case-by-case basis. Whenever we do allow pets, we do have a pet addendum on our lease that essentially shifts any kind of liability that the pet incurs from us to the owner of the pet. So that is another step we take towards it. What you were mentioning earlier about keeping people from packing the house, what we have in our leases is any designated person who's going to be occupying the house, their name needs to be on the lease. Anyone that is not on the lease, they are not allowed to stay on site for more than a certain amount of days in a row before they need to be registered as an official guest if they plan on staying longer. So we keep track of exactly who is and who is not supposed to be on that property at any given time. We also have specific portion of our lease that forbid any kind of subleasing. We simply do not allow that. That's another way we retain control over our property and who is in and out of our property. Same thing, it's partially to make sure we have control of the property and partially for protection for our tenants. If we live in a fourplex, it's not only a case of we want to make sure we have a good tenant in there, we want to make sure we are also doing our part to protect the other units and the other tenants in the remaining units. So we want to make sure that we know who is in there. We want to make sure that all the other units, all the other tenants are in a safe environment, in a safe location.
Yeah, so I'll give All Nighter Hider a shout out. He's here again supporting us. He's everywhere. So go check out his YouTube channel. His YouTube channel's in the chat also. So Hunter, Brandon, hopefully you guys are going to be in Vegas for the ORAD event and you get to meet Hyder. He's a good friend of Simon, the uneducated economist. Hyder also says FIDO score. That's hilarious. He loves that. So we do have a question here. So it says, do you have any advice on how to balance strict screening criteria with filling vacancies quickly?
You know, one of the things, and we have that question with all of our owners, and the statement I always say is a bad tenant is way more costly than vacancy. You don't want us to compromise the process. And that's one of the things that I like about my lead property manager. She's a compliance person. That's not my personality. And I like that. I need that balance to me. I'm more the big picture, the sales, but she is very disciplined and checklists and goes through the compliance, because if we bring in a bad tenant, they're going to regret the bad tenant to fill that vacancy. And it always costs way more than vacancy. Down to the pieces, she not only checks when they're giving all their application, down to if they say, hey, check the employment, because we check employment, we're doing credit checks, criminal background checks. We even check in the county that they currently live in. We're going to the websites, checking if there's any evictions pending. When they're sending in the email address, say for employment verification, it has to match. The email address has to match to the company. And if not, we're saying, no, we want the actual email from the company. We're making sure, going several layers deep to make sure we don't compromise it, but getting that good tenant. And that's just some of the systems that we do, is we check, double check in the application, making sure that where they say their tenancy is, we're actually going to the county appraisal district and confirming they are the owner of the property or the apartment complex. It better confirm to that. We're doing multiple layers, just not taking their word on the application at face value.
Oh, absolutely. Same mindset. I would rather have longer vacancy than a bad tenant. If we've already had several evictions, so we already know exactly the cost of a bad tenant. It's right now, Louisiana, it's a very, very landlord friendly state. So we do have that going for us. But even in a very landlord friendly state, you're still probably looking at potentially, let's say at minimum 3 weeks to get a tenant out, probably, but up to 2 months is definitely within reason to get a tenant out. So if they're a bad tenant, that's 2 months where you're not going to get paid anyway. That's additional damage that you're going to have to fix to get them out. Like once they get out there, once they're out, now it's going to take your time to clean up, begin screening. So you're looking at multiple months of lost income because if you put a bad tenant in there. So that's a much higher cost on the back end rather than trying to save a week or two on the front end by placing a bad tenant. If we have a increased vacancy where it takes us a while to fill it, the strategy we use is we put what we believe is market rate at first. If within a week or two we're not able to get a qualified tenant that we'd be happy with, we would rather lower the price to get more people applying than lower our standards for a tenant.
Yeah, and that's really the way to do it. I just got through listening to Building Wealth, One House at a Time by John Schwab, very famous book. I'm sure a lot of people have read it, but he said multiple times in the book, you always want to make sure that you are decreasing your rent price. You never decrease your standards. You both have already mentioned that the high cost of turnover in tenants. I mean, whether it takes a month or 2 months to actually evict somebody, then they damage your property on the way out. You have a couple weeks to even a month of just trying to get it repaired, depending upon the condition, your subs, things like that. And then you have to turn around and, potentially retake listing photos, get it clean, get it back on the market. And then once it's on the market, you still have, typically 30, days, maybe 45 on average, depending upon the market to find, a quality tenant and place somebody, so a lot of lost income there, by just simply taking a bad tenant and, not doing your homework. So.
Yeah, Hyder makes a good point. Says carry costs can be calculated. Damages are surprise costs.
Absolutely.
Oh, Frank is here. Old guy REI. So go check out his YouTube channel also and his van confessions. He's killing it. And if you guys are in school and haven't checked out his accountability groups on Wednesday, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. They're about to cancel me. They're trying to kick me out of there though because I make too much trouble when I go in. But there's a lot of good stuff going on there. So go check it out. But we do have a question from Ike. Ike is here. Let's see, where did it go? Hold on, I gotta go find it again. I think it was about what do you put? Oh, here. Do you post the requirements in the listing? I usually just post a basic credit score, income, pet fee, background check, and reference will be contacted line. And I guess to follow up, his friend, he said his friend posts paragraphs of rules in the listing, but he thinks it makes him look like a dick, but he says it pre-screens better that way.
We're more on the option A where we say, like, honestly, we ask for a credit score, and if they have a good credit score, we view it as a bonus. But if someone comes in with a bad credit score, that really is not a deal breaker at all for us. Most likely, if someone has the income to afford rent, if they are able and they have a good credit score, more than likely they're in the process of buying their own house already. They don't need to be in for a rental. So unfortunately, usually people renting are going to have lower credit scores on average. As long as they don't have any major delinquencies, if they're paying on time, If they don't have any heavy debt that shows up on their credit report, then we'll still pass them through, if they have a bad credit score. But yeah, we just have a very basic requirements that we ask for in terms of criminal background check, employment verification, a income verification, and that's about it. Everything else, we have a lease for that where all the other rules that we have, it's outlined in black and white in the lease. That way, we rather have things like on paper so the tenant knows exactly what to expect. Before they even sign a lease, we send them a copy of the lease, give them a day or two to look over and make sure they're happy with all the terms of the lease, because we want to make sure they do know what they're getting into before they move into the property.
And for those just tuning in, if you guys haven't heard, go please subscribe to Brandon's Build to Rent YouTube channel. It's new. We're trying to get him to 50 subscribers, so we can stream on his channel. And Stan is offering his book. I didn't even know he was an author, but it's on Amazon. It's free for 24 hours. So go check it out. Give him a 5-star review. But yeah, I love this. I mean, like for you, Hunter, because I think you might be the only one that has properties in your backyard and out of state. So do you
Correct.
find it challenging kind of to, because, dealing with an out-of-state property manager and also having properties closely, do you see kind of like you have to figure out a way to balance that or figure out a way to communicate with the out-of-state property manager?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and quite frankly, something that we're actively working through. Really, the biggest thing is that for properties that are in our backyard that we manage ourselves, our management company manages, it's pretty easy to control the process. We do have minimum standards, 600 credit score, 3x rent, clean credit, clean background check, things like that. We do try to be somewhat upfront. And generally speaking, it's not in our listing description on places that we market, but the way our back end works, as soon as somebody clicks on Zillow or Realtor or Trulia, like wherever they're looking at, apartments.com, it'll take them to another website that then has essentially some pre-screening type questions that'll ask for credit score, how much they make. And really, it's not verifying it. It's just saying, hey, can you please input the dollar amount that you make and the dollar amount for your credit score? And so it's going ahead and doing some of those pre-screening things before they even schedule a showing. But for some of our properties out of state, when we are when we're allowing somebody else to manage that third party, for the most part, we are unfortunately subject to that property management company's standards to rent. Some companies, have a 600 credit score. Some have a 650. Even some have a 700 credit score as a minimum, which I think is kind of crazy. But we were having some discussions with one of our property managers. They used to charge 2x for the deposit. So, if rent is $1,000 for an apartment, they were charging $2,000 for security deposit. And what they were finding, and this was across some of our properties and other people's properties that they were managing, they were getting little to no showings comparatively because people said, hey, at this price point, I can't afford, 2x the security deposit plus the full month's rent, plus, all these other things that start getting added on. And so that was one of the, things we're working through. And so the consensus was they're going to move it back to a 1x, which is very normal. So $1,000 a month for rent, $1,000 security deposit, and they can move in for $2,000 plus some, incidentals. So all in all, those are definitely, more difficult conversations and things to work through. But you really just have to have good communication if you're going to have somebody manage a third party for you.
We have one of our properties. We're also using a third-party management service. It's right now we're based out of New Orleans. The property we have in New Orleans, we self-manage, but we have a few properties over in Lafayette, which is about a 2-hour drive from New Orleans. For that one, we do have a property manager managing one of those fourplexes. For us, for tenant screening for them, we're aware of their tenant screening procedures, and the agreement we have is they do all the pre-screening where they come up with their list of tenants that they believe would be a good match. And then we have final approval from what they've selected for us. So they'll screen through 50 potential tenants. They'll pick out 5 or so that they think would be good fits under their criteria. And then they send those applicants to us, so we also approve it. That way, they get the tenant they're happy with, and we also have a tenant that we're happy with as well. With communication, the property manager service we have, there's definitely communication is sometimes an issue where we're at the point where we're comfortable with them because they're able to do the job. Like if something needs to get fixed, they're able to repair it and they do a good job repairing it. If there's a vacancy, they are pretty good at filling it. If something if there's an emergency, they're good at contacting us for emergencies. But at the same time, we know that we are 4 units out of their portfolio of hundreds of units that they're managing. So we're not always going to get a response to our questions right away. There might not get responses at all, where they're doing the repairs they need to, but they're not necessarily informing us of the repairs until it's time to do the monthly report. So for us, that's more the side of the communication that we don't like. That is a bit of a challenge for state or out of area management, where if you're able to find a management company that is able to do the work, you do have to kind of take a step back from time to time and accept that you're not going to be fully informed of the property. You just have to take it on faith and still do your due diligence, such as showing up and doing an on-site inspection every now and then, maybe a few times a year, to make sure that what the management company is telling you they're doing, they actually are doing.
I feel like we could do a whole section on how to properly screen third-party property management companies.
Yeah, well, that can
Referrals.
be a
Always
topic
get
for another
referrals.
time. Yeah, no, perfect. Well, let's not get too much because actually, I'm going to be doing a part 2 tomorrow, kind of on tenant screening. I'm going to be with MJ, Sky Tyler on mortgage. He's a retired firefighter, but we're going to talk more about after you get the tenant in place, as far as what red flags do you look for? How long do you maybe, if you have a tenant that's you're on the fence about after they're placed. Now, how long do you let them stay, or what's the process for that? So we'll dig into that with like a part 2 tomorrow. But this is a great topic today. I love that. Is there anything else you guys want to dig into? I mean, as far as any other topics, or you guys want to stick to the
Well,
kind
I
of
was going to
screening?
share, if someone wants to see our rental criteria, give my website and they can go under, it's one of the tabs up at the top for property searches and rental criteria is Principled DPM, principledpm.com. They can look. We publish our rental criteria, and then we put that in all of our listings, that they go to that page to look at our rental criteria. It's about 2.5 pages, very specific. And we do have some general credit score requirements. And then you can read out all that rental criteria, what we do for our credit
Do you have the
score.
link? You want to put it in the chat, or are you able to put it in the comment? If you're, yeah, you got to practice. Remember, you're trying to learn how to do this.
I know. I'm learning.
I do have a complaint though. Next time you do an interview with Zuber, tell me when you're releasing it, because I released ours on the same day as his, and I'm like,
I didn't know. I didn't know.
The one we did.
Yeah, they came out the same day, and I didn't
was
know
like,
that.
God damn it. But yeah, Hunter, yours got a lot of good reviews. A lot of people really liked what you're talking about, like the student debt side. When you're talking about early, people are good feedback on that.
Yeah, no, definitely a pleasure to be able to talk through, some of my story and how I got into real estate. I was thinking a little after we talked, like, a part of my story that I haven't shared is just my journey into creative financing in real estate. And, people think creative financing is just subject to and seller financing, but it goes, 30 layers deeper than that. I'm a part of a group here in Greenville that does exchanges. So basically, if you have a property free and clear, single family house, you want to trade that up or use it as a down payment for something, you could trade it into a, single tenant net lease, Starbucks, that's, worth $1 million, and you put the house as down payment, things like that. So we could, definitely go into some things like that on another conversation down the line.
Definitely. Be
Yeah,
interested.
there's so many things, because I didn't know Stan had a book, right? There's that. I didn't know Brandon wears Aloha shirts every time, because every time I see him, he has Aloha shirts on.
I
So
do.
there's all these things that we got to cover later on, but I love it. So yeah, Anything else? Throw out anything. If you guys want to talk about anything, or you going to keep talking about tenant screening, anything.
I did just think of another automatic disqualification that we have during an application. If the tenant has a prior eviction on their record, for us, that's game over. That's automatic denial on our part. Part of it is because we've already been through the eviction process, so we know how intensive that is. And because we've been through the eviction process, we've already seen firsthand how many opportunities there are for the tenants to avoid the eviction process. So if they actually went for the full eviction and it got on the public record, that means that the tenant intentionally made the choice to fight the process the entire time and drag it out to the bitter end. There's so many ways for tenants to essentially avoid, like move out voluntarily, do cash for keys, do a settlement before it even needs to get to court. There's so many notices that need to be given prior to the actual court hearing that goes on the record. So if a tenant's willing to fight it to that bitter end in the past, that's definitely a tremendous red flag for us.
Okay, so I posted the link for Principal DPM for the rental criteria for Brandon's link. So go check it out if you want to find out more about that. But cool, yeah. What else are you guys working on? You guys watch the debate or anything, or what you guys? I mean, interest rates came down. I saw Lance Lambert put. What are you laughing at, Stan? I know. Did you watch it?
I
Hey,
did
what's
not.
up, Lars? Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid that entire fiasco, to be honest. Like, whenever I see highlights, all I see are like, did you guys ever see that South Park episode where they have to vote between a douche and a turd sandwich? I'm just seeing the real life version of that now.
True, but yeah. Now I'm seeing all kind of cats and stuff on my feed because you brought up eating cats in Ohio and all these things, or pets being eaten, and so now there's more stuff we got to put in our leases, right, to protect ourselves of tenants eating pets and things. But yeah, I saw that. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, as soon as I started to see on the news all the things that are happening in Springfield, Ohio, I'm like, wait a second. I know where Springfield, Ohio is. It's right outside of Dayton, which is one of my markets that I invest in. And I'm like, oh no, are they going to migrate more closer to Dayton?
Yeah, I went to college. Man, I mean, it was probably 15 minutes south of there. So I was very familiar too. One of the things I was going to bring up is a story from tenant screening. We had a new owner that we picked up, and he said, "Hey, I've got a renter that wants to fill this vacancy." And the story was this tenant, he thought he had a great tenant on the hook, and we could tell there was extreme urgency. And to me, that's a red flag. When they are desperate to get in quick, there's a reason. And we kept telling even the owner, hey, let's wait. We've got to spend our time vetting this tenant. And they wanted to get in immediately. And we found out exactly why, because there was a pending eviction and they wanted to get in before that hit their record. And so I always say, if there's extreme urgency by the tenant to get into the door and get it signed the lease, that's a red flag. Usually, not always, it's not 100%, but there a lot of times there's some reason they're trying to get in before you have time to vet them. We spend our time and tell them it's a minimum 72 hours, and we're looking to verify everything. But that ended up, we found that exact information, and the owner thanked us because he thought he just had a great tenant, and man, I've got somebody to lease it in here in the next 2 days. And we said, no, we want to do this process. We don't compromise the process. And it saved him lots of money.
Were they going to pay all cash or deposit?
Yeah, exactly. But that's just I thought of that story over the last couple of days as we were coming up on this topic, and just actually that owner thanked both my property manager and me that we prevented something disastrous from happening.
No, I definitely agree with that. We never actually let anyone in before we do our full background check. there's just too many things that can go wrong. There's too much liability. There's too much danger to both the other tenants and the property. So that's one rule we will never compromise. If someone wants in, they need to go through the application process. They need to do the background check. We need to do our verification, and if they pass, then we'll happily let them in. But yeah, we never bypass that part of the process.
Do you guys follow Nate McIntosh? I believe is his name. He's like a comedian, but he kind of talks about like really like finance type stuff. But it was funny. He was talking. One of his sketches was talking about like why leases are so long, because at some point some tenant somewhere did this, right? Like, do not punch a hole in the wall and shit in the wall or some stuff, and it's like, but there was someone that some tenant that probably did that along the way, and that's why it had to be in a lease agreement now. And it's funny that you don't realize that, unless you're a landlord, you start to realize like, man, there's some crazy shit that happens out there.
Yeah.
We talked about even this morning, my wife's like, are you going to do any funny videos? I said, no, my channel's more discussion of investment properties, but I think I've got one idea of just funny things that have happened in property management and excuses. Tenants say, oh, you mean the rent's due on the first of the month? I didn't know that. There's little things like that. And, people saying, I'm going to talk. My dad's a lawyer. I'm going to talk I've got my lawyer on standby. I can't pay my rent, but I've got a lawyer.
We've already had to deal with public defendants here. Like everything is lined about in the lease exactly. Rent's due on the 1st. You have until the 5th. If it's not in by the 5th, it's considered late. If it's not in by the end of business on the 5th, there's a notice to vacate on their door, and we begin the eviction process by day 5. Like everything is written, like the entire process is written out 1% in the lease. So we make sure they know the process. We make some leeway. Like one of the rules that we have is if it's normally been a good tenant for a prolonged amount of time, and they are in good communication, like they're communicating why something's gone wrong, why it's late, and they give us an exact date of when they'll be able to give us the payment by, whether it's a few days later. Yeah, we'll work with them. Like if the tenant's working with us, we'll work with them. Like if we are evicting someone, that's a last ditch effort. We do not want to kick people out of homes. We do not want to kick people out of where they're comfortable. We do not want to put people on the street. That's not the business we're doing. Our business is giving people a home, giving them a comfortable place to build their lives. But that's a two-way contract. They need to hold up their end of the bargain by making sure that we have the income we need to keep paying for that property, keep maintaining that property. And they need to do their part by communicating. Like if they need a couple extra days, cool, we'll work with them. That's fine. But if they are 1% non-communicative, they just decide not to pay, they don't give us a reason, they don't return phone calls, at that point, there's just simply nothing more we can do at that point aside from serve them notice.
We do the same thing we do it after 7 days. It's called a 3-day notice. And I agree, communication is the key. What we do on payment arrangements, say they are communicating and they've got a reason, we make sure payment arrangements are weekly, even splitting it out. If they're saying I can't pay for a couple of weeks, we want to put them on a weekly payment to get caught up, because that also, if they break that payment cycle, we're quicker in getting on to eviction. So we have usually on everybody that does a workout agreement, it's a weekly payment, so that if they fail on that weekly payment, we're getting to eviction faster.
So I'll give a shout out to Lars is here. I forgot Trade Better's here. So Trade Better's also in the school community. And then Ned's here. So Ned, hopefully you're safe too. I mean, if Stan's safe, you're probably safe too, because Ned's in the same vicinity. So hopefully the hurricane didn't affect you too much. And we'll get you on next week, Ned. I know we're trying to get you on this week, but you got some stuff coming up. So we'll try to get you on next week's lives.
I think some other parts of the city got hit worse than we did. Like the older parts of the city where I'm at, like French Quarter, Uptown, for the most part, we didn't really get hit anything too bad. But kind of on the outskirts of the city where they're a little lower down below sea level, They did get some flooding in this area and some not as bad damage as say Ida did a couple years ago, but there's definitely some outskirts of the city that did take a bit of a walloping.
Well, hope everyone's safe. Stay safe out there, everyone. But Traybet has a question for you, Hunter. What do you think about the Intel build delay in Dayton? Have you seen any chaos in the market?
Yeah, so Dayton is in my opinion, a pretty solid market. We're primarily focusing between Dayton and Cincinnati, so that could encompass the city of Dayton, that could encompass the city of Cincinnati, or any suburb in between. There's a lot of great areas. I would say I probably prefer some of the suburbs, and certain zip codes that we really like. Generally speaking, for what we buy, it's 2 to 10 units up in Dayton. That's sort of our buy box. We're not really looking for single family houses. It can't have too much hair on it. Most it needs is cosmetic rehab. So really, we're looking for things that are either turnkey or currently rented. So to answer your question, we haven't really seen it have that much of an impact on tenants or jobs, at the moment. I think over the long run, you'll see a continued increase in property values in areas like Dayton. You'll see continued, increase in jobs, manufacturing coming into the area. Like one of our duplexes is next door to one of the largest steel plants in like 100 or 200 mile radius, $1 billion plant. So we like to be near large manufacturing. Ohio, funny enough, is very similar to South Carolina in a lot of ways. South Carolina, particularly where we are, is very manufacturer driven. Always has been, going back to textile mills. But that's really sort of what we look for, is strong jobs, manufacturing preferred, and how can we create workforce type housing in those markets that is safe, clean, and affordable. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Say aloha, KC, also from the school community. Thanks for stopping by. But I do want to know, Brandon, so where do you get your shirts though then? Like, where do you,
I started this, I guess it would have been 4 or 5 years ago. My whole family, everybody, this is what I wear every day. I have literally, I could go an entire month. I go down the line. What's my next shirt? And it's a mindset. I'm trying to live the mindset of living the island life. We do have a beach property ourselves, and I've told Jill we go to Hawaii about every year and a half, and just I don't know, it's a mindset.
So do you buy your shirts here though, or
I actually have several. I bought in Kahala. I bought Avanti over there, and I have some original Hawaiian shirts. I was there just a few months ago.
So you know that Zuber likes bright shirts, right? Have you noticed that?
Yes.
So at the ORAD event, I called him out because I had like a pinkish shirt kind of on, and he had this bright shirt on, and we had a vote. I posted on social media whose shirt was, I don't know, better, nicer, or whatever you want to call it. But it's unfair. His shirt was like $5,000 or something. He said it's like a one of a kind. He bought it off some artist on the but I won though. Just had to throw that out.
I make sure when he wears something really kind of like a Hawaiian or really wild shirt, I'll make a comment. I did that for quite a while, making comments about his shirts.
Yeah.
Brandon, what island do you normally go to when you visit?
I've only been to 2. We spend a lot of time in Maui and right there in the Waikiki Beach area. Those are Maui, you get more of the natural, but there's still plenty to do there. I know, Mark, that's better than I do, but we like Waikiki for being in the middle of all the stuff going on. We like both. Haven't been to Kauai yet, but there's less people there, a little bit less to do.
I've been to Kauai personally. I love the island. I've only been to the Big Island and Kauai, but for outdoor stuff, there was endless amount of things to do in Kauai.
I heard.
Like the Napali Coast, did that full hike. Kayaked the entire northern coast of Kauai as well. Did some kayaking down some of the rivers to the waterfalls. Spent some time over at Waimea Canyon. So it's not a very big island. There's no really large cities there, but there's just so much like outdoor activities to do. The entire island really seems designed around the outdoors. Big Island, I also like that as well. On the Big Island, it seemed like there's two different flavors of the island. There was the western side of the island that had a lot of Disney resorts, a lot of kind of resort cities. You go there, you spend all your time in the resort. But on the eastern side of the island, like around Hilo, it was still small towns, and that's where I wound up spending a lot of my time. Just kind of wandering around small towns, exploring, eating the local food. The Hilo Farmers Market was actually one of my favorite things to do in that part of the island. It's just endless amount of really amazing fresh fruit, and that's all I was eating for days on time.
Good coconuts from there.
Yeah.
There in Waikiki, we've stayed multiple times in the Royal Hawaiian Moore right there in Waikiki. And I'm an architect person. So I love that Art Deco, that 20s architecture. It's a very beautiful place that is just special.
I definitely want to go back to Hawaii and see the other islands, but there's so many places in the world to visit.
Yeah.
Right now, I try to go to a new place every single time I travel. A couple months ago, I was down in Peru to finally see Machu Picchu. A couple of months before that, I was traveling around Greece, Rome, seeing the Colosseum, seeing Santorini, seeing the Acropolis. I'm actually 5 weeks away from heading over to Tokyo and Nepal. Gonna head over to Mount Everest, hike through the Himalayas. So that's once I get back from that, then I'll decide where I want to go next.
Wow.
So it looks like Ned said he's just cleaning up after the storm. Not much damage from the hurricane, but man, there's a lot of branches, he said. And, Lars and Casey, since you just stopped in, maybe you haven't heard, I'll go check. There's Stan is offering his book on Amazon for free for 24 hours. So go check it out. I'll put the link in the comments again. And like I said, go subscribe to Brandon's Build to Rent Texas YouTube channel. We're trying to get him to 50. Go subscribe to Hunter's Surprise YouTube channel, which I didn't know he knew he had, but I'll put that in the comments also. But Lars does have a question, so let's see what he says. Where did it go? Let's see. Do you think we will see Fannie Mae investment property loans at 6% for refis next year? I am surprised on the price difference between Fannie Mae investment property loan rates for purchase and refis.
It's anyone's guess what the interest rates are going to be coming up. At this point, trying to guess interest rates, pretty much need a magic 8 ball for that. We've got the next rate supposed to be coming up, announced here in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It seems everyone believes that they're going to drop rates. By how much, who knows? And once they get past September, who knows what they're going to do next? It's just a guessing game.
I really believe that's going to happen next year. Right now, the historical average from the 10-year Treasury to interest rates is about 180 basis points difference. And if you look at rates right now at about 6.1, and we're about 245 basis points different, if it goes back to trend, that's putting us, and I think it will, as now the Fed's announcing the rate cuts, I do think that margin is going to go back to historical average, that we're going to see rates in the mid fives possibly by February. And then if we're about a half a point difference on investment properties, I'm believing, and I agree with you, Stan, we can't fully predict that, but I do think because of the historical average we're about 65 or 6.5 tenths difference than the historical average. I think that margin's going to get tighter and tighter back to average. That would put rates today at 5.5 if we were back to historical averages.
That would definitely be nice if we got back to those levels, like 5.5. That's livable. What we had in the last year of historically, even 7's not as high as we've been. We've back in the 80s, we've had 14%, which a lot of people always point out. So we're not at the 80s level of interest rates right now. Even at 7 or 8% combined with the current pricing of housing, it definitely makes it very, very difficult to find good investment properties for investors. And it also makes it very, very difficult for people who just want to buy a house to find something that they can realistically afford and qualify for on top of that.
You know, Zuber interviewed, I watched the video Saturday morning. I think it published Saturday for Convoy Home Loans. And Jonathan was talking about a DSCR loan with 2 points at 5.5. So I called him that morning. I've got a specific scenario at a refi coming up. And so I'm working right now with Jonathan at Convoy Home Loans. And he told me there's a potential. And I'll let everybody know if this closes that he said right immediately right now, he thinks he can get me 5.3 fixed for 30 years. So we're working on this. I even signed the application thing that he sent to document this morning, and we anticipate closing by the end of September. And if he can get me 5.5 even, but if I can get 5.3, I'm going to celebrate. This was on a fourplex. It will increase the cash flow almost $550 a month just on the refi.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So if I can get 5.5, I'd be excited, because that was kind of my benchmark, anything below 6. And then I heard him talking about this DSCR loan that he has, and I jumped on it Saturday morning.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there's definitely some.
No, I was going to say there's a question to follow up with Brandon. Do you need a buy down? Casey's asking Brandon.
Yes. So this would be a 2-point buy down to get it at 5.5. And it's only because we're not doing a cash out refi. If it was a cash out refi, the rate's going to be a little bit higher. And I don't need the cash out refi on this property. So buy down of 2 points to get it to that 5.5.
Cool. Okay, go. Sorry, Hunter. Go ahead.
There's some lenders I've been having some conversations with on X. One of them is a HUD loan broker, which you can go get HUD loans for a lot of different types of properties. He sent me a brochure. If anyone wants it, I can put my email in the chat. But I'm happy to email it. But they're advertising some decent rates in the sixes. Based on the conversations I've been having with them, and it sounds like they can go 80-85% loan to cost on some larger properties, not necessarily single family homes, but 2s and 4s and up is basically what they can lend on. So
cool. So I put Hunter's X profile, so if you can also connect with him there, and you can also maybe get the information he was just talking about. So go follow him on X. And Ned says, I still want rates at 10% for a few years. Clean out all the bad investors. And Hyder says, yep, right on, Ned. Cool. Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of feel that way too. But wealth building journeys here. Chester, I don't know if you guys have met him or know him. He's kind of big in the one rent at a time community. He's always in the accountability groups. And he's been kind of trying to get his foot in the door for a few years, I believe. He's a big follower of Dion, and he finally got his first property. He just closed on his first property, and he's here, and he says he is dealing with more paperwork than ever. Yeah, I'll get used to it, Chester. But it gets easier after a while. You start to kind of get a feel for what's required, I guess, a lot of times. You might, and knowing you'll probably create a file where you're probably going to keep a lot of the essential things that you may need for lenders and whatnot.
The paperwork's kind of required. It's if you want to do real estate right, you have to run it like any other business. Like you need process in place, you need forms in place. You're not going to just let someone in there with a hand-drawn lease. You need to have a professional lease. I was actually, when we first bought this property, we had a tenant in there that it was an inherited tenant. So it's not someone we personally placed, but we were trying to give her a shot to let her stay. She began subleasing the property. They didn't actually tell us about it. She just started subleasing it out without informing us. we started seeing the lease that she was giving out to our subtenant. Wow, it was literally written in crayon. It was like the most, like, I was just in absolute shock of how bad the lease was. Like the least professional thing possibly ever. So I'm amazed anyone was actually willing to sign it.
Whoa, what's that?
Out here too, but wasn't sure who it was coming from.
Who's that? That's not me, I think.
I think that's on my side.
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, hopefully someone's okay. It sounds like someone fell down or something fell down. But Wealth Building Journey said 3 years it took. Let's see. I love the game where one entity like utilities asks for one piece of paperwork, but to get that paperwork, you have to talk to someone who needs another document, and on and on and on and on. Yep. Don't quit though, Chester. Keep going.
It's worth it. It's a lot more
it's
work,
worth it.
but in the end, it's worth it. And like the payoff, it might not be right away. It might be 5 or 10 years until you actually see a legitimate payoff, but the payoff is going to get there, and it's going to be substantial enough, like 100% worth the pay, like all the work.
Well, that's why it fits his name, the Wealth Building Journey, right? Yeah. Oh, man, anything else you guys we can keep talking about? I probably got about 10 more minutes. So anything else you guys want to throw out there, talk about what you're working on, what help you may need or anything?
I want to do a creative finance conversation with everyone soon, next week or a month from now. But I think that could be fun, just talking through different ways to maximize your equity, because that's all we really own anyway. It's just the equity in the properties. So
Can do. I can't guarantee we'll get the same people on, but yeah, we'll set it up and we'll get some people on.
Even if we get one person on, that's good for me. I just want to help more people, learn how to grow their wealth and their equity and do more creative finance transactions. So
my association, we actually just had a class recently for our members on sub-2 properties. So we have one person, she's been specializing in sub-2 for the last couple of decades. So she's passing on that knowledge.
That's great.
For tenant screening, I know at the beginning you mentioned tenant screening for long-term and short-term. We do have different guest screening processes for short-term as well. We primarily use the Airbnb platform, but things like if they have no reviews, that's usually a red flag. If they're a brand new profile, that's usually a red flag. We always ask them, like, what are they coming to town for? Like, we need a backstory. But essentially, we're trying to weed out and make sure they aren't planning on coming to town just to throw a giant party in the house. So we always have different questions we ask them just to make sure, like, oh, they're coming to town for this graduation. Awesome. They're coming to town for this wedding. Awesome. So we try to also have different kinds of screening and verification to make sure that we are still protecting the property from in short-term space as well.
Stan, do you self-manage the short-term stuff?
Yeah. Well, my wife does the day-to-day management of the short terms.
Okay. What sort of technology or things do you guys use to help you manage all that?
A lot of the interpersonal relations, like talking with the guests or verifying the guests, a lot of that is, we don't really use technology. That's more person to person. We might have to switch technology eventually if we start getting more units, but for now we only have one short term. But the primary technology that we use is for pricing. We use a dynamic pricing program that's going to sync our prices on a daily basis. And it's able to extract the prices from the local market. A lot of it is just kind of setting up, make sure that we are putting in the right inputs, like search for other properties in this zip code or in this neighborhood, specifically search for properties with 3 bedrooms to make sure we have a good price comparison. Make our prices on the bottom 40th percentile of pricing and stay competitive. So we use a lot of technology for determining the price of our property, the price per night of our property.
So
That's great.
Hyder says, let's get creative and throw ideas out there like collateralizing a rental to buy a business. That sounds interesting. There's no limit to creative financing. And hopefully Hyder gets his little plan or project together. So he goes to Alaska every summer to fish and I guess help with that. But his idea was to have like a food barge so that almost like a food truck, but on a barge so that they don't have to come in all the time and they can get their orders placed. But that was his plan. So that does sound like a great idea. So hopefully he can get that
Nice.
off and running next year. But every time I think it's every time Stan's on. It could be Ned, but there's always the debate. And so maybe Hunter and Brandon can chime in on this. So we have Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich and Popeye's chicken sandwich. Which is the better sandwich?
I'm guessing that's a Ned question because I don't really eat either one of them.
Oh, really? I thought because New Orleans, so Ned is like by
Oh.
far there's no
Popeyes.
yeah, that's why.
Anyone from New Orleans is always going to vote Popeyes.
But he says it's a different recipe. That's why there, like it's not the same as if you go somewhere else.
I have heard that. I know over here, New Orleans, we're a lot more willing to put a lot more spices on our food compared to other regions.
Yeah, that's what he said too. Like I guess the spicy there is probably like extremely spicy somewhere else.
Yeah.
But Hyder's plan was the burger barge. That's was his plan in Alaska. So hopefully he can get that off and running.
Yeah, I was thinking that probably Popeyes, just because it has more spice. I'm there with Stan. Want the spice? Give me that. I'm sure it's if it's got a lot of kick to it, that's the best one.
Oh, you know what? Actually, we got Texas and South Carolina. So Texas barbecue or Carolina barbecue.
Oh, I'm going Texas. I mean, there's
I'll throw a vote in for Texas as well.
So we in Greenville, there was a new barbecue place that opened up about a year ago. It's called Lewis Barbecue. Their first location was in Charleston, and it's pretty good. And they have some pretty daggum good brisket. I will say that. But I have had Terry Black's barbecue from Texas, and I have to say Terry Black's is
I
great.
literally drove right by it yesterday. Right there in Lockhart, Texas. I was driving right by there.
Hopefully,
Yeah, it's great.
hopefully
love
anyone
the
that's
barbecue.
listening can go back and watch Brandon's expression when Hunter brought that up because he jumped out of his chair when he heard that. He got super excited.
Yeah, we just ate there just recently. The other thing I love, because I've lived in Ohio and Georgia both, is I really do love Tex-Mex food, and that's like staple every week, and that's why I can't seem to lose weight. I've got to eat my Tex-Mex every week.
I love food. Like a lot of places I traveled to, I was trying picking like, what is the top restaurant? What is the top local cuisine? When I was down in Peru, I was eating nonstop, just local food. Like I didn't even know what I was ordering. I just went up to the waiter. I'm like, okay, what would you order from here? Taking all the recommendations, getting whatever sampling platters they have, and it was just absolutely amazing. It's food I've never heard of, but wow, it tasted great.
So remind me, Stan, your blog, is that a food what that's travel blog or
Travel and food.
okay.
So I've got a lot of photography on there. So I've got a couple galleries from different places I've traveled to. So there's a lot of photos, and on the blog section, it's a fair amount of it's food, but there's also general traveling advice as well, like going through national parks, going through different places, where to stay, what to do, restaurants to go to. Quite a lot of them are New Orleans restaurants as well. I think I've got probably 6 or 7 articles purely on New Orleans restaurants. We are very lucky here. We do have an amazing culinary scene in New Orleans.
All right, so I put Stan's
That's awesome.
blog in the comments. Trey Better says Hangry Panda in Seattle, best chicken sandwich. Okay. And then Hyder says I love food too, and being regional, that makes travel even that much better. All right.
So
Well,
I have a hot take on the Popeyes versus Chick-fil-A.
okay.
I think Chick-fil-A quality has substantially gone down over the years. I don't know if it started in 2020, but it's gotten progressively worse. So because of that, I think Popeyes does have a better sandwich. I like the kick. I like the flavor. Um, it's hard to say at this point who has a better quality piece of chicken, but I do like the Popeyes chicken sandwich better.
It's funny. I only Chick-fil-A finally came to Hawaii, and I haven't been there since it's opened. I've only been there in North Carolina, but since it's open here, I've never gone there once. Hey, late start wealth as usual. Late start wealth coming here when we're finishing up. But thanks for joining us. Another school member, John Morris is here. So he just closed recently too. So he's going to be house hacking soon. So congratulations. He's in Florida. Popeyes for me, extra spicy. He says. Yeah.
That's-
Well.
I usually don't
Yeah.
go to any like major franchise or major chains. A lot of restaurants I wind up going to is just smaller mom and pop shops.
See, now we're getting all kind of comments. Like wealth building journey, like Chick-fil-A needs an overhaul. You know, we got to start with the food stuff first, maybe, and then get into the tenant screening and real estate stuff. But you know, we're gonna wrap things up soon. But I don't know if Wealth Building Journey was here at the time. Late Start Wealth. If you guys haven't heard, Stan has a book on Amazon. He has it free on there for 24 hours. Go check it out. I'll put the link again. And like I said, go check out Brandon and Hunter's YouTube channels. Go subscribe, please. We can build up that subscriber count. And yeah, thanks everyone for doing this. I mean, you guys got any final words before we wrap things up?
All good discussion.
Definitely.
All right, let me just put Stan's one last time so people can go get that free, because Casey said anything free he'll take. So I guarantee you, Casey went to go pick it up. But please leave a 5-star review on Amazon for his book. But I'll put it one last time in the chat. So let me hold on. I'll wrap things up, and we'll do this again. We'll get a creative finance one next time, Hunter. We'll figure out who we can get on, and we'll have fun doing this again. But I'll see you folks tomorrow. I'll be doing another one with a few other guests. But yeah, have a good day, everyone.
You too. Have a good one.
Awesome.